What's going on? It's your main man, Rick the Dawn. And if you clicked on this video, you pretty much want to know what the movie was about. And I'm going to tell you that. And then I'll do some spoiler talk. So I'll start off with a review and then we'll just talk a little spoilers. And, that way you can kind of find out what happens behind the scenes. It's not a bad idea to watch the spoiler free version, then come back later after you see the film to watch the other half of what I have to say. All right, so my review of the film is a 8.3. I thought it was spectacular, and I did not expect that. When you look at the title, when you look at the way that it's presented, it comes across as a horror film that might be released in January. But when you're sitting down and you're watching it, you're like, come on, like this is not going to be good. There's no way a movie called Smile, where the boogeyman is a smile. There's no way that this movie is going to be good. No, the entire time, or I would say for the first 5 to 10 minutes of watching the film, that is what I'm thinking. I'm thinking to myself, there is no way that this film is going to be, anything spectacular. Now, I had watched some reviews prior to going to see the film, and I always stopped short of them going into detail. I heard them say the movie was good, and then from there, I just turned it off. I said, okay, I just want to make sure it's good before I actually invest money in the film. And then, I'll come back to it or whatnot and check out what they had to say after I see the film. So I knew going in, the critics thought the movie was a good film. And while I'm sitting there, I'm like, okay, at some point, this is going to crank up. Man, dude, without going into much detail, this is a strong film. Now, what I got from it was to always pay attention to people. That is what I got from it. I know it's a horror film. I know you're supposed to be there for the goo and the goblins and the blood and all. I get all that. But I tried to take something more away. And what I took away from it was to listen to people. And I also took away from it what it feels like if you're struggling with mental health issues, maybe even autism. I know these things are pretty strange. I know you didn't click on the video to talk about autism, but these are some things I took away from it. And what I mean by that, let me clarify. Stick with me here. I'm saying that the way that the protagonist was begging for that. Let me clarify. Stick with me here. I'm saying that the way that the protagonist was begging for people to understand where she was coming from, understand what she was seeing. I feel like some people who go through mental health issues, they're constantly just wanting someone to see what they're seeing. People who go through post-traumatic stress, people who have been in wars and come back here, and you're so easy to look at these people and judge them and say, hey, just get it together. Just sleep it off. That's the easy thing to do. But when you really when you dive into this film, it puts you in the driver's seat with the character as she goes through these hurdles and these ups and downs. And you become partners with her. That's what it feels like, or at least that's what it felt like to me. And as I'm in the passenger seat with her, I'm like, why won't anyone listen to us? We're both seeing the same things, because at that point, only the protagonist and you can see what she's seeing. And you see her trying to explain what she's seeing to everyone and no one understanding. And as I'm seeing her go through this struggle, that's what came to me. If you're walking down the street, you see someone, they seem to be out of it. Maybe they're outside on a street, they might be homeless, or you might, walk past a psych ward or something like that. It's so easy to pass judgment on those individuals because you don't have to deal with what they're dealing with. But what I saw was just like, those people are going through something, and it's not a movie. There's no director to say cut. This is their life. And that's what I got from this film. And I figure that some people, not everyone, will want to know that. Okay. That's what I got from it. It's just like, to really listen to people, give them your ear, and it doesn't matter how insane or how crazy they might come across, just listen. That's what I got from it. And I said autism because typically autistic people can't speak, but they're still aware. And that's what it felt like as I watched her try to explain how she felt. And though she had a voice, people could not understand where she was coming from. And I figured someone with autism might feel the exact same way. Um, oh man. Okay, so that is the end of my review. Now I'm about to go into some spoiler talk. So at this point, if I were you, I would go ahead and click off if you had not seen the film, because now we gotta talk. We gotta have some conversations. Um, you've been warned. Let's talk about it. I'm gonna give you about 3 more seconds. Yeah, yeah, I know I'm very captivating, but you got to go. If you ain't seen the film, come back and kick it with me later. All right, here we go, y'all. So a lady is going through some. First off, this first off, let's just get this out the way. This film was very well done. Now, I didn't get the opportunity to enjoy it as much as I wanted to, because I happened to be in the theater with some kids, and I don't mean like babies. I mean like high school kids, and they couldn't not laugh or could not make a remark at every single junction. I mean, it was terrible. It was like, dude. But anyway, you know what? It's so. I'm not gonna say what I want to say. I'm not gonna say it. Nope. Not gonna say it. Not gonna say it. Nope. All right, throw it away. All right, so, but the film was amazing, and oh my gosh. So it starts off with a woman running into this, hospital, and she sits down and she talks with a therapist, and the therapist is like, hey, so what you tripping about? And the lady, was trying to explain to her that, there's this entity that's chasing her around, and every so often the entity will take the form of somebody she knows, uh out of nowhere. And she kind of notes that this individual smiles, or at least makes the individual who the entity embodies smile. And the entire premise of this movie is this particular entity is contagious. And after it has worn down its victim, it has its victim commit suicide in front of someone. And whoever sees that suicide embodies that particular entity and goes through that loop once again. This film was awesome. Okay. I'm not sure how well it will age. I think over time it'll kind of be like, okay, it was good then, and I don't want to see it again. But I don't know about that. I think this was one of those things where it's kind of silly. I mean, because you would think of a smile as being the least scary thing possible. And I'll go ahead and say this: as I watched the film, I saw the smiles on people, but that's not what really cranks up the fear factor. It's not the smiles. And you go into the film thinking that the whole smile premise is going to be what scares you. Not really. You see the smiles and they do look slightly digitally enhanced, but not so much so that it's something that you are afraid of. You start to kind of put the smile concept to the side and find more fear in the fact that this lady is struggling in a way that you already know how it's going to how it's going to end. As I told you, the therapist talks to the last host of the entity, and she was powerless. So you kind of come to the conclusion that you're watching the protagonist go throughout her last days. And I knew early on in the film that no matter what she did, she would meet her demise towards the end of the film. There was nothing in the film that made or led me to believe that she was going to survive this film. And that's what becomes, or I should say, that's what became the fear factor for me. It wasn't the smile, it wasn't the jump scares, it wasn't, her going to a space and then seeing someone with a smile on their face. It wasn't that. It was the fact that I knew there was nothing that she was going to be able to do ultimately. And I knew that no matter what happened, this film was not going to have a happy ending. I just knew that, because is trying to explain what's going on to people and no one is listening. It got so bad that not even her sister is listening. And okay, we have to talk about how far horror movies have come. The imagery in this film is masterfully done. Okay, I'm an artist and I can see the art in just about anything. Show me anything, I'll say it had to be designed, and I can find the art in it. And this film is no different. The imagery is artistically and masterfully done. Okay, listen, look, I don't even. There are images in this film that I will probably see for the next week or so. And I'm being very modest here because I don't want to speak things into existence. But I will say comfortably that for at least 2 weeks, I will be able to vividly recall a lot of the things I saw today. Okay, let's talk about the ones that stand out the most. Okay, she goes to her sister's house. She's trying to explain, hey, I'm sorry about the cat. And I'm not going into everything about the movie because either you're going to see it or you've already seen it. And I don't want to recall everything in the film. I don't want to, do that to you. So let's just get straight to the point. She goes to her sister's house, I believe, for a second time to kind of apologize for the dead cat Mustache. What a great name for a cat, by the way. She goes over there and she kind of points out that she understands what's happening, and that this is a chain of events that has taken place, and that she may know how to defeat it. She goes back to her car because her sister just like, hey, you're acting like mom, and I don't want anything to do with you. Okay, and you feel bad for the protagonist, and it kind of leads to what I said earlier, where I know there's nothing she's going to be able to do. I've seen this particular cue in horror films too many times to not catch on. I've seen too many horror films where you can just tell that the director, producer, the writers, they're going to kill off their protagonist. I just knew it. Same thing with Sinister. Okay, I just knew that Ethan Hawke was not going to survive this because they made that particular entity just too powerful, and I felt the same thing here. But she goes to the car, and you see the sister come out of the house. She walks up to the car, and you see her face, and you're like, okay, no smiles, everything's fine. And then the most insane horror moment this has to be a top 20 horror moment for me. But her head dangles down the opposite way. Her neck is twisted and she has a smile on her face. It's like a jump scare mixed with a genuine scare. Now, I wasn't afraid. I'm not really easy to scare in these kind of films, but I was impressed. I'm like, they had the guts to do that. Okay, like I thought that something like that would not make it past a certain point because on paper it has to come across a little goofy. Like, wait, you're gonna turn her head upside down and twist her neck and have a smile? Wait, that could be kind of cool. It was insane how they pulled it off. I mean, I was just like, wow. Okay. Yes. So let's get this out the way. The kills, the suicides were very gruesome. Yeah, pretty bad stuff there, I have to say. But but that head twist thing was outrageous. So I want to talk about the second part that absolutely just blows everything I've seen prior to this point away, and why I say horror films have made a incredible jump in terms of technology and digital animation or what have you. Okay, filmography. She goes to her mother's old abandoned house to try to fight this smile entity, and wow, she's looking down the hall. She opens the door. She sees her mother, who committed suicide when she was younger, on the bed. We all know that it is a hallucination. She closes the door, and lo and behold, this entity has taken its true form, opens the door, and is a giant. I mean, it was masterfully pulled off. And I usually when I see like digital animations or creations, I can tell it's digital. This was one of the few times where this giant specimen of a person, I cannot tell it was digital. It almost makes me look or feel as if it was a practical effect, that they got somebody real tall, but this person was at least like maybe 10 feet tall, so it's not even possible. But it was masterfully done. Then they finally zoom in on the face of the entity, because up until that point, most of the entities showings came through another human being. Okay, but this was the first time where they actually show the entity itself. And wow. Oh wow, oh my gosh. Okay, listen, I can't explain this. I even looked online to find pictures of this entity so I can show you from my phone. There I think the horror community is doing an amazing job at keeping things under wraps. Because had I seen this online, I would have been prepared for it, and maybe you'll be prepared for it if you haven't seen it. But the way that this thing moves, the skinny bone, the bone, the bones and how bony it is, the long scraggly, Jerry curl hair that the thing had is insane. Now, that's not exactly where things peak because at some point, this entity gets a hold of the protagonist and now look, just to backtrack a little bit, I told you about the first victim who commits suicide in front of the therapist, which causes the therapist to take on the host. Okay. Now, apparently, at some point in the interchange between the protagonist and the host, the initial host, she sees something, the host sees something, and that's when something switches in her behavior and she finally commits the suicide, which I don't want to make light of. I'm saying suicide as if it's like a passable top, nothing's cool or cute about suicide. In fact, I hate that this movie, that's maybe one thing I would say as a criticism. I hate that that's the way it has to go about. But to be clear, it's not technically suicide because the individual or the person that is hosting the entity has taken over by that point. And at that point, the person is not killing himself. In fact, it's the entity that does the work. So let me be careful and let me take a step back off the S word and let's just say that this is pretty much murder, okay? And that's not much better. But the point is, I'm trying to be a little bit more classy here. Now, but at some point, the initial host snaps, and you can see something in her behavior change, and that's when the entity finishes the job. And at the end of the film, you see what made that snap happen, and it finally happens to the protagonist. The protagonist is so strong, and you're rooting for her. And like I said, she's at her mother's abandoned home, and they played a spectacular trick on the viewers. You think that and it was so funny because I'm thinking to myself, wait, that's how you kill this entity? That's all you have to do? You just have to close your eyes and say, I know I can, I know I can, I know I can. And then the entity bursts into flames. I'm like, is that it? But they did an amazing job with how they tricked the audience. I thought the film would end, but then we find out there's another 5 to 10 minutes left, and that was well done. She goes to her ex-boyfriend's house after defeating the entity, basically taking control of her imagination, and you think the film is over because you see the entity burst into flames. But it turns out when she gets to the boyfriend's house, after some conversations, you see that smile on his face, and he says something like, I'll be with you forever. And that's when she snaps out of the hallucination and she realizes that she's still in the house with the entity. And by that point, you realize that the writing's on the wall. There is nothing she's going to be able to do to fight this entity off. And she put up a heck of a fight. I believe at some point they discuss the individuals who have been captured or become a host for the entity last about 4 days to a week. And I believe that this particular character, the protagonist, apparently lasts about 5 days, 4 to 5 days. So pretty much follows the same archetype. But the point I'm trying to make is you see her fight a valiant, or she puts up a valiant effort to defeat this particular issue or entity. She does a great job, and you're like, how does she not survive? How does she not beat this thing when she's fighting this hard? And she seemed to be making so much traction. She spoke to somebody who actually overcame the issue. And that particular person who overcame the entity had to commit a murder, which wasn't necessarily a resolution. So this film did not provide an easy way out for the protagonist, and you just felt for her. You just knew that it's not going to end well for her because either she's going to have to do the unthinkable, or the unthinkable will happen to her. Well, just so happens you see the snapping moment. Apparently, when all these people appear to do something to themselves, you realize why. Because this entity, okay, this thing puts his hands in his own mouth and pulls his face off. And, you know, oh, man, dude, I don't think I've seen anything that I don't think I've seen anything that bad. Okay, when the monster thing pulled, because like I said, the protagonist, she's fought really hard, but now she's looking at this thing eye to eye, and you see the snapping moment. You see what had caused these other individuals to snap and just become powerless. This thing pulls his mouth open. Oh my gosh. And what you see from this thing is absolutely, oh man, I don't know what to call it, because it's something I've never. Yeah, dude, this was crazy. This was crazy. I am going, when this movie comes out on Netflix, Hulu, or whatever it comes out on, I'm going straight there because I have to study how disgusting. I have to see this again, and nothing will prepare you for what you're going to see. Now, I'm someone who has a very strong stomach. I'm not afraid of much. If not, I'm not afraid of anything but God Himself. This didn't cause fear in me, but it was so impressively disgusting. Okay, I don't know how to put it. It's like you're looking at art by Frida Kahlo. Okay, Frida Kahlo, her work is very, very mature, sometimes very bloody, very mature, bloody, lots of grotesque things, but it's beautiful. It's like, this is masterful. This is art. And I hate to paint it this way, but when this thing opens his mouth and you see the underlayers of its skin, and you realize that somebody designed this, you're like, wow. Okay. You're happy it's not real, number one, but you realize that some person either digitally or used practical effects to make this happen. And you're like, is this where we have come in horror films, where you can make something look that impressive? Long gone are the cringy animations, the cringy CGI. I don't know what I want to see this film on DVD so I can see some behind the scenes stuff, because it was too impressive, whatever that was. And then, as if that particular scene is not enough, you see the next part of this snapping moment where the entity opens up the protagonist's mouth and proceeds to climb in her body through the mouth. You're like, what is, and they show everything. Okay, there's nothing that they're holding back. They show everything, and I'm telling you, this was one of, if not the most impressive scenes I've seen in a horror movie ever, bar none, bar none. Okay, I've seen tons of horror films, and this is going to make horror films have to step the game up. Long gone are the days where you can make an impressive kill with a knife. Okay, we're out of that era. We got people, we have entities, we have things pulling their faces open and then pulling the protagonist's faces open and then climbing inside. That's where we are in the horror genre. So I'm not impressed. I would say the bar has been risen for me. I'm no longer impressed by knife kills, gun kills, chainsaw kills. What I just saw was insane, which is why I'm talking about it for this long. Yeah, so I'm giving this film an 8.3. I feel like my review might be slightly off because I didn't get a chance to fully enjoy it. I was in the theater with some freaking kids, and there were like a group here that was terrible. There was a group behind me that was terrible, and it was like they were competing for who could be the most terrible. And one group won because they got escorted out. So, I mean, take my review with a grain of salt. I say a 8 out of 3. I was still able to pay attention. It was just like you had this bug in your ear, but I was still able to see and hear what I was watching and hearing. But I would say confidently this movie is a 8.3 or higher. I don't think it's much lower than that. And I'm saying not as a horror film. I'm talking about as a film. I would say confidently this movie is a 8.3 or higher. I don't think it's much lower than that. And I'm saying not as a horror film. I'm talking about as a film in general, which means for me, just in case you're wondering, a 10 out of 10 is Titanic. Titanic, Forrest Gump, those are Malcolm X. Those are 3 of my favorite movies of all time, and I would give them all a 10. This is not far. This is an 8.3. So when I say 8.3, I don't mean in the genre of horror. I mean in movies, period. Okay, that's how satisfying watching this film was. and the special effects were amazing. In terms of jump scares, they had quite a few, but they were not the jump scares of 2007. Jump scares have come a long way. It was pretty mature how they handled the jump scares, but I'm glad they had the courage to kill off the protagonist. I thought that they might try to be slick, like I said, when they trick us, the viewers, by allowing the protagonist to overcome the entity in her mind. You're happy she survives it, but you're thinking to yourself, it's no way that's all it will take to beat this thing. It's just not possible. And I started to think about it. I said, wait, she is a psychiatrist, so maybe the bad person, the bad boogie, whatever, they stumbled upon the perfect match for them. Okay, you're this entity is something that controls people's minds, but if you're going against a psychiatrist, they're always the ones who help people who have mental challenges. So I thought that might be a cool way to swing it, but boy were we wrong, because we see what really happens. Okay, yeah, you got to see that. That's yeah. The sound was really good. The sound design was very, very well done. You heard things that were not always on the screen. I actually appreciated that. You heard a lot of different things that you can tell they really paid attention to. So for that particular, or I should say, overall, I really enjoyed it. Now, maybe you're wondering, because I don't know if I've made this clear yet, but I saw two movies tonight, and that those two movies were Smile and Barbarian. Okay, maybe you're trying to figure out which one you want to go see. My answer is you should see both. Okay, they were both amazing in their own right. But if you're asking me, I think Smile is just a pinch better. Now, Barbarian is getting a lot of praise in the horror community, but I thought that the ending for Barbarian lacked. It was very lackluster, very rushed, if you ask me. All right, not the best ending. So for that reason, I would say the Smile edges out Barbarian by just the slightest of margins, because, man, the ending for a Smile was perfectly executed. Perfectly executed. All right, but anyway, I hope that definitely helps you out, helps you understand, what you're getting yourself into. Okay, if you go and see that ending, come back and let me know if I'm overdoing it. Did I set you up? It wasn't that impressive. Let me know what you think about it. I know what I felt like when I saw it. I just like this. This is insane. The entire movie theater, even those annoying, the entire movie theater, even those annoying groups, the one behind me, they were finally silent, because this is not something you talk through, okay? And this is not something you make a joke out of, because this is something we've never seen. Okay, you can only see something like this in this movie. Like, you will never see anything like this ever, except in this film, and that's what makes that ending so satisfying, because you're seeing, well, at least for me, someone who actually enjoys the background of films, I knew I was seeing something pretty spectacular. All right, in terms of filmmaking. So anyway, thank you so much, and I will see you soon. Don't forget to subscribe if you like what how I kick my game. If you like how I do my reviews, I'll do some more if you subscribe. All right, until the next time. Peace.